Some girls just aren't built for the spotlight, Felicia. You were always better in the background.
Cynthia said it light, breezy, like she was commenting on the weather, and the whole tent laughed. Not a polite laugh. The kind that's been rehearsed for years, passed around the family like a serving dish nobody questions anymore. Felicia Michiel sat at the kids' table. Say that again because it matters. Felicia was 28. She owned her own flower shop. Nobody sat her there by accident. She'd been placed there, on purpose, with a plastic cup of sparkling cider and her 6-year-old nephew using her arm as a drum, because her older sister Cynthia had decided, 20 minutes earlier, while adjusting a diamond bracelet that cost more than Felicia's annual lease. There's no room for you up front, sis. You didn't bring anyone, and we're tight on space. And Felicia, who had spent her whole adult life swallowing exactly this kind of thing with a smile, looked out across her sister's engagement party, at the white tent, at the string lights, at Cynthia glowing in a dress that cost 4 months of flower orders, at Marcus. Marcus, her ex. Now somehow the best man, standing 2 feet from Cynthia's fiancé like none of it had ever happened to Felicia at all. And she felt something she'd felt 100 times before, but never all the way to the edge. She felt done. So she opened her mouth and the lie that was about to set her whole life on fire walked right out. Actually, Felicia said, loud enough to travel, I'm seeing someone. The laughing stopped. It's serious, he's running late. Work thing. She had no idea where the words came from. They arrived already finished, like they'd been sitting behind her teeth for years, waiting for a door to open. Cynthia's smile didn't drop. It refined itself. It became the smile of someone who has just watched a fly land in the web on its own. Oh, how nice, she said. And what does this very busy, very serious man do? He's in imports, logistics mostly, and his name. Felicia's mind went white static blank. Guion, she said, grabbing the only thing her panicking brain could produce, a name off a business card she'd shoved in the shop's junk drawer months ago and never called. Lee Guion, he's coming. Cynthia's eyes lit up with the specific joy of someone who has decided to enjoy watching a person drown in real time. She turned, voice pitched to carry across the whole tent. Everyone, Felicia has a boyfriend, a serious one, in logistics. We can't wait to meet him. She turned back to Felicia, sweet as poison. We'll hold the toast, dear. And that, right there, is the moment Felicia Michiel understood she had 90 minutes to either produce a man named Lee Guion out of thin air, or die of embarrassment under her sister's string lights. What she didn't know, what nobody under that tent knew, was that there was a real man named Lee Guion, that he was, at that exact moment, parked across the street, that he owned more of that street than anyone at the party had any business knowing, and that in about an hour he was going to walk under that tent, put his hand on the small of her back, kiss her temple like he'd done it for years, and turn the worst night of her life into the best one, for reasons that had nothing to do with luck, and everything to do with a secret he'd been sitting on for 6 months. Before we go any further, tap subscribe and turn that bell on, because this one's got more turns than the road to her shop, and I am not letting YouTube bury this. Now let's go back 90 minutes, to the moment Felicia walked under that tent already regretting it. 90 minutes earlier, Felicia had parked her delivery van 2 blocks away, because the venue didn't want the flower girl's work van near the photos. She sat behind the wheel for 4 full minutes doing the breathing her therapist taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, you built something real. You don't need this family's approval to know that it worked exactly until she walked through the tent flap. Cynthia descended on her like a front-page headline. She took Felicia's chin in 2 manicured fingers, tilted her face like she was checking produce. You look tired. Are you still doing those early markets yourself? No assistant, no man. Running yourself into the ground for a little flower stall. It's starting to show, sis. She patted Felicia's cheek and floated off before Felicia could answer. That little flower stall was Bloom and Company. It carried their late grandmother's arranging traditions, the ones she'd brought with her decades ago, the ones nobody in the family bothered to remember by name. Felicia had built it from a folding table at a Saturday market into an actual storefront with her own 2 hands. It was the proudest thing she'd ever done. Her family called it her little hobby, the way you'd describe something a child made out of macaroni. The next 90 minutes were a parade of small cuts. An aunt asked if Felicia was still single, the way you'd ask if someone was still recovering from something. Cynthia's future mother-in-law told her, kindly, that there was no shame in being the helper sister at these things. And then there was Marcus. Marcus, her ex of 3 years ago, now somehow the best man at her own sister's engagement, found her by the drinks table with the warm, oily confidence of a man who thinks he's being generous. "No hard feelings, right?" he said, gesturing at the tent, the lights, Cynthia's ring. "Funny how things work out the way they're supposed to." Felicia smiled and excused herself before her face could do anything she'd regret. It was right after that, paper cup of cider in hand, looking for a quiet corner, that Cynthia found her, walked her to the kids' table with a hand on her shoulder, and made the comment about not being built for the spotlight. And you know the rest. You know about the lie. You know her brain, under maximum pressure, coughed up the name Lee Guillaume. What you don't know yet is whose name that actually was. Quick thing, if you've ever sat at a family event smiling while people who share your blood took turns making you the punchline, drop one word in the comments. Background. Just that. Let's find each other down there. Felicia made it to the parking lot on legs that didn't feel entirely like her own. The plan, and I use that generously, was to fake a phone call, disappear for a minute, actually call the number on that business card, beg, come back devastated, announce a work emergency, survive the night. It was a terrible plan. It was also the only one she had. She was halfway through rehearsing the fake call out loud. "No, baby, it's fine, work comes first," when she heard a voice. Low, male. Speaking a language she didn't understand, in a tone she absolutely understood, because some tones translate themselves. It was the tone of a man telling someone something that wasn't a request. She looked up. Leaning against a car so black and so clean it looked cut out of the night was a man. Tall, dark-tailored coat, no tie, the kind of stillness that comes from never once in his life having had to hurry for anyone. He ended the call, slid the phone into his coat, and looked up at the sky like it had personally let him down. And Felicia McKeel, humiliated, desperate, 28 years old, completely out of road, had the single worst and best idea of her life. She walked up to a total stranger and said, "Hi, I know this is insane. I need you to be my boyfriend for 1 hour." The man turned his head and looked at her. He didn't say excuse me. He didn't say I'm sorry. What? He just looked, with dark eyes that gave nothing away, for a silence so complete that Felicia kept talking just to fill it. "Okay, that came out unhinged, I hear it. There's a party, my sister's engagement. My family treats me like the family disappointment because I run a flower shop, instead of marrying well. And tonight they sat me at the kids' table. And I snapped. And I told them I have a boyfriend. And they demanded proof. And I panicked, and said his name was..." She stopped, squinted, lowered her voice. "This is going to sound insane," I said, "Lee Guillaume." Something moved across the man's face. Schwinger wouldn't have caught it. Felicia, who read faces for a living over a counter full of roses, caught it. "Why that name?" he said. His English was careful, lightly accented, unhurried. "Off a business card in my shop's junk drawer. I don't even remember who left it." She shook her head hard, like clearing an Etch-a-Sketch. "Doesn't matter. Look, I'll pay you. I have..." She dug through her bag. $30 and a punch card for a coffee shop 2 doors from mine. One more stamp and it's free. 1 hour. You walk in, you're rich and busy and obsessed with me. You let them be jealous for 60 minutes and you leave. Please, I'm begging a stranger in a parking lot. This is my life now." The man looked at the $30. He looked at the punch card. He looked at Felicia, actually looked in a way that made her feel, for one disorienting second, like the only interesting thing in that parking lot, which was strange because she was fairly sure she looked like a woman mid-breakdown next to her own flower van. And then Lee Guillaume, because of course it was him. Of course the name in her junk drawer belonged to the man in this exact parking lot. But we'll get to how, did something that surprised even him. "Keep your money," he said. "Is that a no?" "That is a yes." He pushed off the car, buttoned his coat in one smooth motion. 1 hour. "But I have conditions." Felicia blinked. "You have conditions? For fake dating me at an engagement party? 1. You will not tell me what to do once we are inside. You will let me work." He started toward the gate and she scrambled to keep pace. 2. When this is over, you will answer one question for me, honestly. That is my fee. "What question?" "Later." He stopped at the entrance, looked down at her. 3. If I am going to be obsessed with you for an hour, I will need your name. "Felicia," she said. "Felicia McKeel." "Felicia McKeel," he repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like a fact he was filing away permanently. He offered his arm. "Then let us go make your family deeply uncomfortable." She took it. She had no idea she'd just hooked her arm through one of the most dangerous men on the entire coast. She just knew his sleeve was very solid. He smelled like cedar and money, and for the first time all night she wasn't walking in alone. Here's something nobody tells you about borrowed confidence. It's contagious, and it's also terrifying once you realize you don't know where it's coming from. Felicia walked back under that tent on the arm of a stranger, fully expecting to do all the work, narrate him, prop him up, whisper coach a nervous logistics guy through pretending to like her. Instead, the second they crossed the threshold, Li Gian went somewhere. He didn't get louder. He got quieter, which was somehow worse for everyone standing under those lights. He scanned the party once. A single slow pass, the way a lighthouse beam crosses water, and Felicia felt the exact moment every head began to turn, because a man who looked and moved like that, attached to her of all people, simply did not compute. There she is. Cynthia's voice carried across the lawn, already armed, already certain this was about to be a bloodbath in her favor. And, oh, is this? Li Gian didn't wait to be introduced. He crossed the distance, slid his arm around Felicia's waist like he'd done it 10,000 times, leaned down, and kissed her temple, slow, unhurried, the kiss of a man with nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Sorry I'm late, love, he said, warm, easy, a completely different voice than the one he'd used in the parking lot. Traffic. The tent went silent. Felicia's heart was going like a hummingbird, and not entirely from the stress. You must be the family, Li Gian said, straightening, his hand settling easy at the small of her back. He smiled. It was a good smile. It did not reach his eyes, but only Felicia was close enough to know that. Felicia has told me so much. And here his gaze drifted, mild as weather, toward the kids' table, toward the cup of cider, the nephew still mid-drum roll. She didn't mention you'd be seating her with the children. I must have misunderstood. I assumed a family would put their most accomplished member somewhere with a real chair. Silence. Cynthia's mouth opened, closed. I'm sorry, accomplished? Marcus recovered first, with a smug little laugh. Felicia runs a flower stand. Li Gian turned his head and simply looked at him. She runs a business, he said pleasantly, that she built from nothing, with no investors, no inheritance, and no help, in an industry that eats most people alive within 2 years. I've reviewed harder balance sheets run by men with MBAs and trust funds. A beat. What is it you do again? Marcus, who worked in something vaguely financial in the way men who don't really do anything work in something vaguely financial, opened his mouth and discovered there was nothing in it. That's what I thought, said Li Gian gently, and turned away. And the dismissal was so clean, so total, so surgical, that it took the entire tent a full 3 seconds to understand that a man had just walked into their party and removed Marcus's spine without raising his voice. Felicia stared up at her fake boyfriend. He glanced down, and just for her, just for a second, the corner of his mouth moved. Breathe, Felicia McKeel, he murmured. You're doing the gaping thing. She closed her mouth. This, she thought, was going to be a very interesting hour. If you're enjoying watching this man dismantle these people one by one, and I know you are because so am I, smash that like button. It tells YouTube to push this story to every person who has ever wanted exactly this to happen at their own family event. He's just getting started. The second car arrived around hour 2. And Felicia noticed because Li Gian noticed first. They were sitting together a little apart from the others by then, at the adult table now, because Li Gian had pulled out a chair for her at the head of it with such quiet authority that no one had dared object. He'd turned out to be, once he stopped being terrifying, dry and devastatingly funny. When an uncle tried to corner Felicia about her biological clock, Li Gian said without looking up from his plate, Felicia is 28. The clock is fine. I'd be more concerned about the shrimp, which has been in the sun for 2 hours. Food safety is also a kind of family planning. When Cynthia flashed her ring for the 5th time, he examined it with the bored eye of a man who had clearly seen a great deal of jewelry. Lovely. A little cloudy near the setting. The cut hides it well, though. Whoever sold it to your fiancé did him a kindness. Cynthia spent the rest of the night holding her hand at a different angle. And in between the demolitions, something quieter was happening. He'd noticed Felicia hadn't eaten, too anxious all night to put anything in her stomach, and he clocked it without a word, just built her a plate, and set it in front of her. Eat! You can't win a war hungry, and this is a war. She noticed things too. When the family patriarch slammed his hand on the table mid-argument about football, Li Gian went still. Not much, a stranger wouldn't have caught it, but a stillness with a held breath inside it. Then it passed, and he was easy again. Felicia filed it away. She knew that particular stillness. It was the stillness of a body that remembered something the rest of him had decided not to discuss. Then Cynthia, sensing she was losing, played her trump card. She announced, sweetly, pointedly, that there'd be a first dance for the happy couple, and that Felicia and her mystery man simply had to go first, to warm up the floor. She was certain this would break the illusion. Surely a fake boyfriend wouldn't dance. Lee Gyan stood and held out his hand. "I should warn you," he said quietly, just to her, as the music started. "I have not done this in a very long time." Danced? Held on to something on purpose. And then he pulled her in, one hand at her back, and they moved across the lawn in front of a family that had come to laugh at her. Somewhere in the middle of it, Felicia looked up at this impossible man and understood that neither of them was acting anymore, and that he knew it too, and that neither one of them was going to be the one to say so first. It was right after the song ended, while Felicia was still trying to remember how to breathe normally, that the second car pulled up outside the tent. It was nicer than Lee Gyan's. Pearl white, low, the kind of car that announces a person before the door even opens. The door opened. A woman stepped out in a deep red dress, hair pulled back so severely it looked load-bearing, and the kind of beauty that had clearly been engineered, refined, and ensured. She scanned the tent once, found Lee Gyan, and smiled the way a shark smiles at a swimmer who's drifted past the buoy line. "Myra," Lee Gyan said, and for the first time all night his voice lost its warmth entirely. "You weren't answering your phone." Myra crossed the grass like the party had been thrown for her arrival specifically. "Your father's office called mine 3 times. We had a dinner tonight, Gyan. The Huon merger doesn't sign itself." "I had other plans." Myra's eyes finally landed on Felicia and traveled slow, assessing, the kind of look that prices a person like furniture. "I can see that." A small, bright, terrible laugh. "And what is this? Charity work?" "Felicia," Lee Gyan said, "owns a flower shop, a successful one. Myra is the daughter of a business partner of my father's, and she has spent 2 years acting as though that makes her my fiancé. It does not." "It will," Myra said pleasantly. "The moment your father stops indulging you." She turned back to Felicia with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. "Sweetheart, I don't know what he told you to get you to play along tonight, but I'd enjoy whatever this is while it lasts. Men like Gyan don't end up with women who sell carnations out of a van." Across the lawn, the family, who had spent the last hour quietly Googling Lee Gyan's name and turning progressively paler, watched a second terrifying stranger arrive and start a fight with the first one, and understood that this engagement party had stopped being about Cynthia roughly 40 minutes ago. Felicia felt her face go hot, the old, familiar shrinking instinct kicking in. Say something small, make it easy, don't make a scene. And then she felt Lee Gyan's hand settle, deliberate and unhurried, back at the small of her back. "Myra," he said, "you flew across the city to interrupt a stranger's family party because I didn't return a phone call. I would ask you to consider what that says about who actually needs whom in this arrangement." He paused. "Tell my father the merger is fine. Tell him I will sign whatever needs signing on Monday, in an office, like an adult, and that none of it requires you driving to a flower shop owner's sister's engagement to inform a woman you've never met that she sells carnations out of a van. A beat. She sells peonies, mostly, and roses. The van is for delivery. I'd ask you to get your facts right before you insult someone. It's bad form." Myra's smile thinned to a wire. "We'll talk Monday," she said, and turned the wire on Felicia one more time before she walked off. "Enjoy him while you have him. If you're enjoying watching grown adults get quietly dismantled at a party, you know what to do. Smash that like button. It tells YouTube to push this to everyone who's ever wished a stranger would step in and handle it for them." Now back to the lawn, because Myra wasn't even the twist. She was just the warm-up. It was almost the 3-hour mark, the 1 hour having quietly, completely, become the whole night, and nobody under that tent acknowledging it, when Felicia and Lee Gyan ended up on a bench near the dessert table, half listening to a string quartet butcher a pop song, actually talking. About her grandmother's flower business, about the shop, about the cooler that kept dying every July. That's when his attention shifted, slightly, toward the gate. Felicia followed his eyes to her uncle, the connected one, the one with the import business and the lawyer on retainer, and the friends he never quite explained who had gone, in the space of about 4 seconds, from laughing at a joke to staring at Lee Gyan, like he just recognized a face he'd only ever seen in a context he didn't discuss at family parties. He leaned to his wife, whispered. His wife's hand went to her chest. The whisper spread, the way Felicia's own lie had spread 90 minutes earlier, except aimed at the right person this time. Lee Gyeon turned to her, and the easy warmth he'd worn all night was still there, but underneath it now Felicia could see the other thing, the parking lot thing, the thing that had made Myra's smile go thin. Felicia, I need to tell you something before someone here does it badly. Okay. The card in your junk drawer, do you remember who left it? A man came in a few months ago, asking about the building, the lease. I told him it wasn't for sale, I was busy. He left a card. I never called because something about it felt. She stopped. Her stomach dropped. That was you. It was mine. I came to ask about buying the building. Why? He exhaled. I own most of that block. I've been buying it quietly for 2 years. Not to develop it, to protect it. There's a man trying to take the entire street through a shell company, using methods that are not legal and not gentle. I've been buying the block out from under him, building by building. Yours was the last one. The one you wouldn't sell. And the man behind the shell company? Is standing 20 feet from us in a rented tux, currently telling your other aunt that he closes deals for a living. Lee Gyeon's gaze went, mild and lethal, across the tent to Marcus. Your sister's best man has expensive taste, and a fiancé's family with more pretend money than real money. He needed your building to finish the block. He spent 6 months trying to force you out to pay for the very wedding happening at this party. Felicia sat very still on the bench. All the mockery, all the background, all the kids' table, suddenly recoloring itself in her mind. The smuggest man at the party had been quietly trying to take the one thing she'd built that was actually fully hers. I'm going to need a minute, she said faintly. Take it. A pause, and the dangerous voice came fully back, except now it was pointed at her behalf instead of at her. And then I will show you what happens to men who try to take things from people I've decided to protect. We're heading into the part where karma finally collects. If you're with me, drop one word. Carnations. Let the algorithm know who's still here. Here's the part Lee Gyeon hadn't mentioned yet. The part he saved for the bench. Because somewhere in that bouquet of revelations he'd apparently decided today was the day he stopped leaving things out. The deal, he said. Marcus is financing. The shell company. I pulled the funding line at 9 this morning, before you ever walked up to me in that parking lot. Felicia turned to look at him fully. You saved my shop this morning, and let me beg a stranger to be my fake boyfriend, and didn't say anything. You didn't ask if I'd saved your shop. You asked if I'd be your boyfriend for an hour. I try to answer the question people actually ask. That is, okay, that's insane. You can't just... Because, Lee Gyeon said and stopped. The man who had spent 3 hours surgically dismantling an entire family without raising his pulse suddenly found his own hands extremely interesting. If I told you the shop was already safe, you would have had no reason to keep talking to me, and I hadn't figured out a different reason yet, so I said nothing. And then you grabbed my arm and I thought, this is the reason. I will be her terrible fake boyfriend for 1 hour. It has been 3. I haven't wanted an hour to end this badly in years. Felicia looked at the most feared man in the tent, who had just confessed, with the emotional fluency of a nervous teenager, that he'd let her drag him into an elaborate lie because it was the only excuse he could think of to keep talking to her. You're terrible at this, she said. At what? Liking someone. You dismantled my whole family and you can't tell me you like me without staring at your hands. That is accurate, Lee Gyeon admitted. And Felicia Owusu started to laugh. Really laugh, for the first time all night, maybe the first time in months. After a second, quietly so did he. Marcus found out about the dead financing at 9:47, and Felicia happened to be watching when his phone buzzed, which she would later describe as one of the great small pleasures of her adult life. First the frown, then a second buzz, a third. Then him stepping away from Cynthia, color draining out of his face the way it drains from a man realizing his entire future evaporated 12 hours ago while he was busy smiling at an open bar. Everything he'd promised Cynthia's family, gone. The wedding he'd been quietly funding off a payout that no longer existed, a stack of invoices with nothing behind them. And Cynthia's side of the family, who Felicia now understood had been treating this engagement like a merger from day one, started doing math in real time as Marcus started sweating. It rippled across the tent exactly the way Felicia's lie had rippled 2.5 hours earlier, except this time it landed on the right person. And that's when it happened. The thing Felicia hadn't expected, even after everything else. Cynthia found her by the dessert table alone, the bracelet suddenly looking too heavy for her wrist. "Did you know?" she asked, quiet, none of the performance left in her voice. "About Marcus? About the building?" "I didn't know any of it until an hour ago." Cynthia was quiet for a long moment, looking at the tent, at the unraveling wedding, at her own engagement ring suddenly feeling like a prop. "I used to be the pretty one," she said abruptly. "Did you know that, when we were kids? Everyone said it. Felicia's smart, Felicia's sweet, but Cynthia's gorgeous. And then you hit 16 and just overtook me, like it cost you nothing. I had the surgery 2 years ago because I couldn't stand losing that too, on top of everything else. And you didn't even notice because you were too busy building something real while I was busy maintaining something fake." She wiped under her eye, careful not to smudge anything. "I sat you at the kids' table because watching you walk in here, glowing, not even trying, made me feel 19 again. It wasn't about you. I just didn't know how to be in a room with you and not feel small." Felicia stood there holding a paper cup of cider, completely unprepared for an apology dressed as a confession. "You're still my sister," she said finally. "You didn't have to do any of that to matter to me." "I know that now," Cynthia said. "I just wasted a lot of years figuring it out at your expense." She looked over at Marcus, currently being quietly cornered by his own future in-laws. "I think I need to go deal with that." "I think you do." The party ended the way parties end when the groom's finances have just evaporated, and the family pariah turns out to be dating the man everyone's suddenly terrified of quickly, with several people pretending to take very important phone calls. Felicia and Lee Guion left together, of course, ending up exactly where they'd started, in the parking lot beside her flower van with its check engine light, next to his car that still looked like a hole cut out of the night. "So," Felicia said, "the hour's over. The 3 hours, the deal's done. You held up your end. My family is going to be quietly terrified of me forever, which is honestly the nicest thing anyone's given me all year." She tucked her hair back. "Your fee was a question. Ask it." Lee Guion was quiet a moment. "That was the question," he said. "I was going to ask why a woman like you was single. That was my fee, the thing I'd wondered since your file first crossed my desk." He shook his head slowly. "But I spent a night with you, and now it's a stupid question because the answer is obvious. You're single because everyone in your life spent years convincing you that being chosen was something you had to earn by getting smaller. You refused to get smaller, so they called it a flaw." He looked at her. "It's the least flawed thing about you. I withdraw the question." Felicia stood in that parking lot and found, to her enormous irritation, that her eyes were stinging. "You can't just say things like that," she said. "You stare at your hands when you try to say you like someone, and then you just casually. Felicia." "What?" "Have dinner with me. Once. No family, no performance. You be a person, I'll attempt to be one, and we'll find out if whatever happened on that lawn happens again when no one's watching." A pause. "I should warn you, I'm bad at being a person. You've seen the evidence." "One dinner," Felicia said. "But I'm picking the place, and you're tasting the new peony arrangement I'm testing for spring, and you're giving me a real opinion. Not a scary rich man opinion. If you tell me it's competitive with comparable arrangements, I'm leaving." "Understood." The corner of his mouth moved, the almost smile she was already dangerously starting to collect. "And the $30 in the punch card are still yours. A deal's a deal." "Keep the money," she said. "Keep the punch card too. I think you've earned the free coffee." "I have decided," Lee Guion said, "that I would like the excuse to come back for it." Here's the thing Felicia didn't find out until their third dinner, the one where she'd officially stopped being able to pretend this was casual. She asked him why he'd really come looking at that block in the first place. 2 years, a small fortune, a street he had no obvious connection to. He was quiet a moment. "I have a connection to it," he said. "Your grandmother." Felicia put down her fork. 20 years ago I came to this country with nothing. No money, no English, no people. I was 19 and angry and very close to becoming the kind of man who doesn't come back from the things he does at 19. He turned his glass slowly. There was a flower shop on that street. Small. Run by a woman who had no reason to be kind to me and was, anyway. I used to stand outside because it smelled like somewhere I wasn't. One morning she came out and instead of telling me to move, she handed me a bundle of stems too wilted to sell and said, "A man who looks like nobody's feeding him should at least learn to grow something. Sit. The world isn't done with you. It's only been rude so far." Felicia's hand went to her mouth. She let me sit there most mornings for almost a year. Never asked who I was or what I did. When I had money, much later, I went back to thank her. the shop was closed. I was told she'd passed. I didn't know she had a granddaughter. I didn't know the arrangements survived. He looked up. When your file crossed my desk 6 months ago, a stubborn flower shop owner who wouldn't sell, who gave free bouquets to the men sent to scare her, I recognized the arrangement style in the photos before I ever recognized you. I've been protecting your grandmother's shop since before I knew your name. I just didn't know how to walk in and say so. Felicia was crying openly in the middle of a restaurant, across the table from the most feared man on the coast, who had just told her that a kindness her grandmother threw into the world 20 years ago had circled all the way back and saved her granddaughter's whole life without either of them knowing it was happening. She used to say that, Felicia whispered. The world isn't done with you. It's only been rude so far. She said it to me first, Lee Gi-yeon said gently. I've been waiting 20 years to find out where to put the thank you. Turns out the answer was across a table from her granddaughter, badly in love, terrible at saying so. Marcus did not marry Cynthia. The financing was gone, and so, almost immediately, was the enthusiasm of everyone whose interest had been the financing. He relocated to a smaller city to sell something to people who didn't know him yet. The man behind the shell company received a visit, the contents of which are not part of the story, and quietly retired from the business of frightening small shop owners permanently. Myra still calls Lee Gi-yeon's office sometimes. He still doesn't pick up. Cynthia tells people now that she always knew Felicia and Lee Gi-yeon were meant for each other. She has edited the kids' table out of the story entirely. Nobody corrects her. It's funnier to let her think she got away with it. And the two sisters, slowly, are figuring out how to be in a room together without either of them needing to be smaller. The shop is thriving. It turns out a block that's quietly, completely safe from predatory developers is a very good place to run a small business. It also turns out that having one of the most feared men on the coast show up every evening at closing to test new arrangements and glare at anyone rude to the staff is extremely good for foot traffic. A year later, Felicia walked into another family party alone, on purpose, because she'd grown all the way into the woman who didn't need an arm to hold to walk into a room. 20 minutes later, the long hood and zero patience for traffic pulled up outside, and Lee Gi-yeon crossed the room, past relatives who now sat up straighter when he walked in, past the empty chair no one would ever dare seat her away from again, and kissed her in front of all of them, slow, unhurried, a man with nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Nobody laughed this time, and neither of them was acting. If you made it all the way here, you're exactly my kind of person, and I mean that. This isn't over, because Myra doesn't lose quietly, and Marcus kept a folder he shouldn't have. And a man who retires from a business that frightens people for a living tends to have a brother who hasn't retired from anything. Part 2 is coming. Subscribe so it finds you, ring the bell so YouTube can't bury it, and tell me one thing down in the comments. When Lee Gi-yeon said yes in that parking lot, did you already know he wasn't really a stranger? Or did the bench scene get you the same way it got me? Be honest. I read every single one.